Survivor's ready. Go!
Trump spoken.
Boston Rob and Amber are gonna do it.
This is a business trip, as I like to say.
You Brad Culpepper.
I'm tired of you and the fucking chicken.
You can call me the puppet master. They can be my little puppets.
It's not like you make me deal with the devil here. You get to milk your own milk, I guess.
We got enough rocks here, too. We could build a pretty decent shelter just using rocks.
I'm supposed to talk loud,
Direct from Hobart, it's time for the only Survivor podcast in Australia dedicated to Survivor. Bringing you today's interviews, episodes, and opinions from the greatest reality show on the planet. It's Survivor Oz, and here's your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Survivor Oz, and welcome back to proper episode recap with proper contestants. Enough of hearing us talk about it for the last couple of weeks. We're finally getting things worked out here in Ben's absence. And even though, we could have our pick of pretty much anybody in the Survivor community, there's one man in the history of Survivor in every single season who is so dynamic, so dependable, always gives such good material that we absolutely had to have him back for a second appearance on this season. He missed out on second chances, but he has a second chance at this season on Survivor Oz. Welcome back, Billy Garcia.
Hey, how you doing, Colin?
Wonderful. I'm so glad we actually have somebody to talk to this week. We've been trying to work out different schedules, but you're always good to come on, and you always give good material, so looking forward to talking about this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm suspicious of the people who didn't make it on the previous weeks. I think they're looking for the hidden immunity idol.
Yeah. They're all like Ty. They're snooping around. They're drawing suspicion of themselves. We did say we had you on in episode 2, and I have a couple of things to remind you about later on from the last recap. Some of your predictions and everything. We'll see how that ironed out. But some of them may not be too bad. We'll leave that for a surprise later on. But I don't know how much has changed about your opinion in the last month or so since you last appeared on the show, but how are you finding the season now as we're heading this close into the merge?
I think this season has had its ups and downs, but it's mostly up, so I'm positive about the season so far.
And this past episode, we could really talk about some of the ones prior to this, too. A lot of the storylines I feel like we saw this week were things that have been building for the last few weeks. I think that's something that's been done really well this season, is kind of fooling the audience and building these good story arcs and everything. But just coming into this, obviously there was the whole situation with the medevac where Caleb had the medevac, and that threw off the numbers, and obviously the merge was postponed. But before this episode aired, were you expecting a merge at this point, or were you expecting the tribe swap that happened prior to this? How are you finding the way the show's been structured the last couple weeks?
I think the medevac had a lot to do with the structure. And just on a side note, Big Brother people are never going to hear the end of the Big Brother guy that couldn't hack it on Survivor.
Yeah, okay.
So they're going to get a lot of ribbing at these events. I'm not upset with any of the structuring, with the exception of how do you go about getting the hidden immunity idol with the clue and then the tool. And that whole thing seems convoluted to me.
Yeah, well, the way that's played out, we've seen it now. I think back in episode 2, there might have been a little bit of mention with Ty, I guess. I don't know if it was that episode or not. But since that's happened, now we've had it where all three have found it on each beach. And obviously there was a little bit more drama on the bronze side than Neil just sort of stumbling across it and Ty and everything. But with the way this is going, do you think the show is making the right moves going forward to make these idols harder to find, or did it kind of flop this season from what you figure?
I liked last season's twist better, where it was at the challenges. This season, I think this is going to be a one and done. I don't see them repeating this version of the idol clues.
The thing that I think really didn't work was, and it's an interesting idea about hiding it up in the tree and then giving them the tool, but which tribe was it? I believe it was the Braun tribe. When they found theirs, they actually lost their tool, and I think Ty, it was the exact same thing. So everybody's losing the tool to get this idol, and yet everybody found it no problem. So it's like they're setting up this big complex thing for you to go to, and everybody's like, no, I'll just sort of toss this stick up there and knock it down. It's not really working out the way that I intended, I think.
Yeah, I was actually watching one of the episodes with a longtime fan, and we kind of muttered under our breath when Jason lost the tool, and then and then he used something else to get it out anyways. We were like, yeah, that's because he's already a tool, so he didn't need the tool.
Yeah. Yeah, Jason's the one guy I think on this season that pretty much anybody would make the same assumption about. Let's, I mean, again, before we talk about this recent episode, just since we haven't had any Survivor voices on the last few weeks, let's get, from your perspective, a lot of what went down, I guess, first of all, with that whole medevac thing a few weeks back. You know, obviously, we found out since then it wasn't just Caleb, you know, or even the people involved in that, but we've seen Liz was medevaced, and we've heard now that Peter was medevaced, you know, just from Ponderosa and everything like that. This season has worked out to be so harsh, and I think the funny thing, the thing that's we've talked about a little bit on our other episodes, is how this season was filmed before the previous one that aired, Second Chances, and yet we're not really seeing the exact same thing from one season to the other. So what do you think is going on with the medevacs? Like, is this something that the producers didn't really account for? And then how do you think it changed when they did film the Second Chance season following that?
I think, first of all, I think a lot of the medevac is really within the game. Certain players are to blame. And I hate to put blame on players because, you know, I'm always biased towards us against the producers, sort of us against them attitude, I guess. But, yeah, in this case, I have to, you know, concede that there was a lot of talk about how to go about boiling water, and you better boil it because it might have all sorts of things in the water. And I forget what exact terminology was used, but it was something that was kind of a little, you know, a little far-fetched from a fellow New Yorker, no less. So I think that is playing a role in that they're dehydrating themselves to the point where even if they go out the conventional means like Peter did, they wreck their bodies on the way there. And you know, dehydration is something that no survivor has ever come back from yet. We've yet to see it. Yeah. And what is it, 32 seasons now? So I think it's safe to say that that's probably the most serious thing that survivors go through out there is the dehydration, even over the bug in the ear.
Yeah. Oh, that was pretty bad. Oh, well, I think that's the other interesting thing that, we've talked about this on a few of our other episodes, our Oztopsies and the Ozlet shows, but it's just, it seems like this year the producers are really going out of their way to fool the audience. And we know that spoilers are going to leak, like everybody knew about the medevacs. And I almost feel like every week they're throwing something new in there to make you think, oh, this is going to be the medevac. Like, are you getting fooled by that? Are you finding yourself kind of picking it apart and thinking, oh, this is the setup here, obviously. You know, Joe's going to be medevaced. He got hit on the head.
Well, see, that's the whole thing. That's why I try to avoid all of that. Even though we saw in the trailer and all that stuff leading into the season that there was going to be many medevacs, I just put that out of my mind, and I just, you know, I try to observe what's going on in the moment instead of trying to predict what's going on and what's about to happen. So I try to just stay in the moment, and I look at what's going on, and I try to read like from a former player's perspective of, all right, once that scene is over, then I digest it, and this is what I think really happened. Yeah. But instead of looking at it and try to figure out where they're going with this, I'm sort of looking at it from the other perspective, which is look at it once the scene is done and see where they went with it.
So I'm actually interested then to hear your perspective on some of these players that we've gotten rid of in the last few weeks. I would say particularly Anna, because this episode really had a lot to do with Anna being voted out prior to this, or a lot of how the game is being structured. Was Anna somebody that coming into this you saw as a player that could win this, or that she was playing the game well?
She was definitely, I you know, in my predictions, many of my predictions, I compared it to Natalie Tenorelli, because they both Survivor fans, they're both young, and they're the kind of person that a person like a Caleb would have attached himself to, just like Boston Rob attached himself to Natalie. So I totally saw her as a potential finalist. as far as winner, it's hard to predict the winner because bitter juries play such a role. So there's no way to, in my opinion, you could tell who they're going to be bitter against just by the previews. But you can sort of predict who's going to be there at the end. And so Anna was definitely one of those that I saw in that final episode, just because of the comparisons that I was drawing to. It was a shame that she went when she did. But it goes to show you that something like a Caleb leaving via medevac totally shook up the game. I don't think she'd have went if Caleb was still around.
Yeah, we've kind of seen now this shift where the beauties went from winning every single challenge, and now they become the target. We saw that was basically the reason Anna was voted out, and there was probably, everybody's assumption going into this past episode, well, Julia's doomed. There was that twist where she was kind of on her own. She would be out of the loop. Now with these beauties just sort of being picked off and being targeted and really not having any clear alliances with them, do you think this had a lot to do with the fact that they didn't go to tribal, or what do you think the real weakness is here? Is it how they played the game, or is it the fact they just haven't been able to play the game yet?
When they lost that one player, that was the opportunity to start picking them off. Mm-hmm. If they would not have lost that one player, it's very likely they'd have had 3 on each tribe. And that is such a difference maker.
Yeah.
With the way it played out with Caleb going out, that put Julia at the sort of exile island type situation. She would have never been in that situation had Caleb not gone out. Mm-hmm. So that to me that was the how do I put it? That was the moment where the crossroads moment where they went from being from the penthouse down to the outhouse. And it's unfortunate, and then also I think there's a lot of ignorance going on in this particular season. Like I mentioned the bug in the ear thing.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the moments where like if any other season, especially in my era of Survivor, they'd have known like just jump in the ocean. Like it's a bug, the salt water will kill it. So there's a lot of ignorance going on in this season, and I'm not sure what's behind it. If it's the producer's way of casting it to make it more interesting, or if they just got so bombarded with twists they don't know what's going on. Maybe it's a little of both. I don't know. But taking out the beauties the way they have because they were strong in the challenges. I mean, the guy that made them strong in the challenge is gone. You don't need to attack them. I think they were in a situation where you could have manipulated to them or dictated to them policy, and they would have went along with it just to survive. So I wouldn't have been so quick to pick off the beauty.
It's interesting because prior to this interview here, I've been sort of looking at the beauty tribe and thinking, well, they didn't have those clear alliances. You had Anna's side, and then you had the guys who were kind of divided, and I was thinking, well, there's no way that they really could work together at this point. But at the same time, you brought up, 3 numbers. That means a lot, especially when you've got these 3 tribes battling each other. And that's really what we saw with the Brains this week. I mean, it played out a little bit differently, but I don't think anybody would have really expected that Peter in a tribe swap was going to have even a second that he'd be working with Aubry and Joe, or that Aubry and Joe would really want to work with Peter. But that extra number played such a huge part this week. So do you think that the beauty tribe that could have happened? Like, or I guess we could even say going forward, we have a lot going on right now with Nick and Michelle, where, again, no real alliance going into this, but suddenly they're talking. They may be making fun of each other, behind the camera's back, but they're talking at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we didn't see any of the true alliances in the beauty tribe because they wouldn't have played out.
Yeah.
Thanks to so I think the editor just felt like it was unimportant, so he didn't include it. But there was a lot of hints of alliance. There was a lot of implications that they were alliances in that tribe that sort of fell apart when Caleb got medevaced out.
It's interesting because, like you said, if you look back, we didn't see a lot of the beauty tribe. We definitely didn't get a chance to see where they were going to go when it came to tribal. But almost every scene I think of on the beauty tribe, minus Ty, trying to kiss Caleb or whatever. Other than that, everything was focused on strategy. You had Anna saying, "These are my numbers. You can come with us." You had, Ty saying, "Well, maybe I can go with this person," trying to find the idol. And it was almost setting up that whether they go to tribal or not, these are the big players come the end. And now there's suddenly nobody left. We're left with Nick. We're left with Michelle. We're left with Julia. They haven't really had a chance to tell a story at this point. So are you thinking that there is any hope for them going forward this late in the game where a story could develop for them?
Well, if there is, it's because at the merge, word gets around of the super idol that's possible. Mm-hmm. So you get two people that each have a piece of the idol. They could form a super idol alliance, and that might be how that plays out. With Ty being one of those in the beauty, he could pull his other two beauties and say, okay, I got numbers. Now who's, try to figure out who has the other, another half of the idol, and then pull those numbers together. And then you got a super idol alliance of 5 to 6 people that could take over the game. That would be one way to go. And that would put the beauty at the top of the food chain at that point. But, is there somebody in the beauty tribe that could decide, that could get sort of investigate and figure out who's another person that has an idol? Is there that person? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would have picked Anna to be that person.
Yeah, exactly.
To figure that out. Yeah, but now she's gone. So now they're kind of. I feel like they're a little bit at the mercy of some luck here.
Probably
need a break.
I mean, if we're being honest, probably at the mercy of Scott, because he's the one who's got Ty on his side now. He's the one who convinced Ty not to use the idol the previous week. And, of course, we know that he's at least aware that Jason has it on the other side. So,
right.
Yeah, I'd like to get your read on Scott because a lot of fans have been very divided on him throughout the season. There was the scenes with him and Alicia, which rubbed some people the wrong way. And it's almost like we're seeing a completely different Scott, especially with the way he is with Ty. It's like kind of this fun relationship that you don't often see in Survivor, this unlikely duo. What's your read on Scott? Are you feeling that he's more like the Scott earlier in the season, a little bit condescending, cocky, or is he very social like this week?
No, I think Scott is typical to a lot of this team sports play that we've had on Survivor, that they tend to warm up to the dudes on the tribe,
yeah,
and they tend to be very cold to the women. Just because in team sports, that's what you got. You got all the guys in the locker room, and it's like no women allowed. Mm-hmm. So they develop that way socially. And so I wasn't surprised to see that Scott had issues with Alicia. And then now somebody who's as diminutive as Alicia is in stature, he has no problem with Ty. And just the opposite, he's warmed up to him. So I think that has a lot to do with being a team sports player. But I'll admit this, that and not to the extent of worlds apart, but there were a lot of people in this season that get into the douchebag edit.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're saying. Well, that's another thing we've talked about in the last few weeks. It's like, if you look at the season, you try to think, well, because sometimes you figure, well, who's a likable enough winner that they're not portraying negatively? But then you also get those seasons where it is a villain that goes on to wins. And this season, it's just, there aren't that many characters who have received such a positive edit. I mean, Ty is one. Maybe Joe. I don't think you could. Do you find Joe endearing? I have to get your opinion on him.
No,
not at all.
They totally tried to play him up in the preseason when they announced the cast to be like a Rudy. He is more like a BB than a Rudy. I'm sorry.
I gotta say though, I'm the guy who loves BB, so maybe that's why I warned him. But like with some of these characters, I think Sydney's received a positive edit. That's one for sure. But yeah, a lot of these people, it's just Nick, it's the condescending thing. With Debbie, it's very mixed what's going on with her. What's your read on Debbie at this point? Now we found out she's a part-time model too.
Yeah, Debbie. See, I'm a guy who legitimately wore a lot of hats in my life, being a former Marine, former pro wrestler, and a heavy metal guitar player. That's a lot of hats to wear in one lifetime. Debbie is like, how women are with shoes, but she's that way with hats, with jobs. She has a whole closet full of jobs that she's held for 5 weeks.
Yeah. She's kind of the female coach, isn't she?
You know what, Coach was a good storyteller, in that he told some pretty good tall tales, and he would build himself up to be this warrior inside of this battle royal. And even though it was very forced and and nobody completely bought into it. Nobody bought into it, let's be honest. But it was still entertaining enough to where it was like, okay, I could totally see why he's thinking of Warrior, because Survivor is sort of like a every man for himself type war situation. So I could see that. But Debbie is, I know everything about everything because I held that job at some point in my life. So, I'm trying to find a redeeming quality in her because she's clearly lasting.
Yeah.
So you don't want to like the people that are there, but wow.
I mean, she's by far the biggest character, I think, on this season. Much like somebody like Coach or Philip Shepard. The thing that I'm having a hard time reading on her, though, is her game going forward, because we see that she has a lot of control, but I'm really starting to look at the last few weeks how she seems to be talking to everybody and saying, I really want you to win, or especially the women, saying I really want a woman to win. And Nick brought up an interesting point this past week to Michelle when Michelle's like, Debbie wants to work with us, and he said, don't just jump at the first person who says that. And, as condescending as Nick is, it's interesting that he kind of was right, at least in the case of Debbie, because I never really had thought about the fact that she's pretty much made an alliance with every woman out there, and she's not going to hold to it with everybody, is she?
No, there's no way to. When you make an alliance with everybody, you're going to stab somebody in the back.
Mm-hmm.
It's guaranteed. And that was the game that I tried to play, actually. So, but but Debbie, how is a good way to describe? Everybody wants to compare to Coach, but to me, it's like I compare her more to like, what if Philip Shepard had Abby Maria's mouth?
Yeah,
that would be Debbie. That would be Debbie. So.
Yeah, she's definitely the unique one this season. With the challenge this week, we saw Joe obviously take a bump to the head. You've given us some opinion on Joe. Joe as a physical character, though, like, did you expect him to be out by this point, or is he impressing you at all with his challenge performances or his ability to, take a knock on the head?
Well, I knew he'd be a tough old goat. That I
FBI.
That I knew. So I wasn't surprised to see him bleeding and still hanging in there. What I was surprised was the failed attempt to take him out early in the game, where if it wasn't for the fact that Peter and Jen were so arrogant, they would have succeeded.
Yeah.
But they were so arrogant, and so that's what saved Joe. And then there's certain types of players, and I'm being one of them, that if you could make it past the first couple of rounds, those first 2 or 3 eliminations, that you're gonna go far. And that's what I think Joe is. There's players in the past that, like Sugar, she could make it past those first couple of eliminations. She's golden. And then we saw it both ways, where she didn't and then she did, or the other way around. She didn't and then she did. But yeah, and Joe falls in line with that kind of player where it's all about making it past those first couple of rounds, and he didn't do it himself. It was Debbie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It didn't matter. Yeah, it didn't matter who or how or what was the circumstances, so long as he did it. So now when we get to the merge, he's so non-threatening. Who the hell's gonna go after him? He's so non-threatening.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. I mean, he's that player where every single week his chances just go up because he's not going to be a target. And the fact that he is kind of the grumpy old man, the Rudy or the BB, it's going to make, at least, even if the audiences watch this, like, I don't think the audiences on Borneo had any idea, or I should say the players had any idea that the audiences would end up loving Rudy as much as they did, or even that the jury would. So there's probably no idea at this point that Joe is one of those guys who might be able to win some people over. He has a couple of friends out there. I have to talk about the whole situation with him and Peter this week. The FBI mode coming out.
You know what's great about that is that he was right on both ends.
Yeah.
He was right about Peter, and then he swallowed his pride and tried to stick with him, and he was right about wanting to stick with him and keep those numbers. And then then he got stabbed in the back. So I'm curious as to, is he going to swallow his tongue, bite his tongue and swallow his pride? Or is he going to go into flip mode like he did on Peter and just go off about being stabbed in the back? I think it's the latter, which would be entertaining.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of the way it played out this week was Joe really bringing together the plan, but then ending up being the one guy on the outside. And, I mean, I have a couple of opinions on why Joe did what he did. Obviously what happened is he tried to convince Aubry, let's get Peter out. He clear, whether it was through his doing or just the other people on their own, Julia and Ty and Scott were willing to get Peter out, even though Peter was going to them. Like, that's the crazy thing with Peter. We'll get into him in a second, but Peter couldn't convince the people who it would help to align him with that it was a good idea to align with him. But all of a sudden the vote flips and, Joe doesn't want to do it anymore. So what do you take on that?
Well, no, it was Aubry who came to Joe and said, we need to stick together and we need to keep our brains together. And so Joe was on board. He swallowed his pride. He wanted Peter out, but he swallowed his pride and he did the team thing. And then it was Aubry who came back and flipped the script on him. And he's like, you can't be jumping all over the place. You got to come up with a plan and stick with it. This ain't going to work, the constant flip-flopping. So he was like, that's it. You came up with a plan. We're sticking to plan A. We're not going to change it. And he was right, in my opinion. That's what he should have done, because they just handed over the power.
Yeah.
Now they no longer have the power. As for Peter, Peter was at a point where he couldn't have convinced the leopard that it had spots.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to convince anybody of anything. I feel for him because he was, and to some extent, he and I had a similar game. In that I was caught in like guys on one side, girls on the other side, and I would try to play the middle, and that's what he was doing. He was trying to play the middle, and it reminds me of an old quote from the movie Karate Kid, the Ralph Macchio version, the good version, which is walk on left side, you find, walk on right side, you find, walk down the middle, sooner or later, just like grape.
Just like grape, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And that happened to me and Peter.
Yeah.
So that's a lesson to all you Survivor fans that might one day play this game. Walk down middle, just like grape.
Yeah, I mean, we really never saw Peter change in this game. I mean, you're the type of player that you can admit, like you said, Peter played the same mistakes that you made, but had you stuck around another week, you would have learned from your mistakes. I almost guarantee that. You would have changed your game up. But Peter, it's like we had the whole arrogance thing with the Liz vote early in the season. And the very next time where he didn't feel he was in jeopardy, he's again calling people out in tribal again, like, I'm not going home. And the fact that he's conspiring this week on both sides, and I mean, it seemed like he's a guy who would never get it. Do you think if Peter ever had a chance to come back, that he would change his game? Or is this just a guy who's just so stuck in his own way that he doesn't see any way out of it?
Well, first of all, let me correct myself from much early in the podcast. I said Jen when I meant to say Liz. And secondly, I think Peter needs to see himself on TV to get it. So I think, he might change his game if he ever gets another shot. But he needed to see himself on TV. I think he was very unaware at how he was rubbing people, which was the wrong way. Nearly every interaction, with the exception of Liz. Liz was the one person that was on his side and didn't care that he was arrogant because she was arrogant. I think he needed to see himself. And I agree with you. I think once the merge came, I would have got with like Cowboy and Flicka and that whole group, and that would have changed my game completely. I'd have found people that I just would have wanted to stick with all the way to the end.
Can you imagine how much more exciting the finale would have been? And we wouldn't have had the ridiculous fire building challenge, the entertainment of that, but how entertaining could the finale have been if we had people with personality like you and Flicka and Cowboy, and that was the finals? Instead we had like Ozzy and Yule and Becky and Sandra. I mean, not big characters.
Yeah, Yule, even though I think he was the perfect politician as far as, like, he never said anything. He just knew how to give non-answers. And he let other people do the work and took credit for it. Perfect politician.
Yeah.
I think you could have replaced Yule with a cardboard cutout and nobody would have noticed.
Well, do you feel like at this point we've had a few of these big characters go now on this season? Peter was a huge character. For better or worse. Alicia was a big character.
Huge character, yeah.
I would say Jenny, even after her, tribal council, the whole standing up, I mean, that's the type of character I want to see at the end. And we are kind of now left with, we were talking about this the other day on one of our other shows, as good as the season is, as good as some of the strategy shaping up to be, we have people like Nick and Neil and Michelle and Julia. I mean, these are not huge characters. They're not really dynamic personalities. do you feel like the game really has to be the focus, or can these personalities come out at this point, or is just there's not enough time left?
I'm the eternal optimistic, so I'm hoping that the editors held them out, and we'll get to see something from them. But the realist in me is like, yeah, we're not heading into a riveting finale here.
Yeah.
this is shaping up to be just like my season, where all the characters went along the way, and then you get the Beckys and the Sundras who let's be honest, like if they had to carry the show, Survivor would have died.
Oh yeah. With the way that the vote played out this week, we talked a little bit about Joe, but do you think this hurts Joe and Aubry's relationship going forward?
Yeah. I'll just be honest. I think Joe is going to have to summon up every ounce of discipline he has to keep from choking her, and I mean that in a literal sense. Yeah, Joe is going to go into flip mode, and rightfully so. But if he could just hang on, just bite his tongue a little bit, there's a merge coming, and I think Joe will flip. I think Joe will go to the other side, because at this point, what choice does he have? And then this is where it'll get real interesting. It'll get real interesting because there's going to be a scramble. Once one person flips, it's like a domino effect. Then another one will flip, then another one will flip. Before you know it, there'll be like 3 sides to this instead of 2.
Well, it's interesting that last season was made up, and of course these players didn't see last season. I mean, it hadn't even filmed by the time they finished wrapping the season up, but last season was all about the voting blocks, and I almost felt like that was the way this season was going. We had a lot of talk about how Aubry and Neil were a pair, Debbie and Joe were a pair, Ty and Caleb were a pair, Anna and the other 2 girls, I'm blanking on their name, we haven't seen enough of them, Michelle and Julia.
Yeah.
But it hasn't really, I mean, the way that the tribe swap worked out, those pairs were all split up. Michelle and Julia aren't together. Neil and Aubry weren't together. Debbie and Joe weren't together. How do you think this is going to affect everything going forward into the merge? Because normally we go into a merge and we can bank on the fact there's these old alliances that'll stay true. And I just don't know if these alliances were tight enough in those early days in the game, or if they're too far removed that they'll hold together. What do you think can happen now?
Well, I'm gonna pull back the curtain a little bit here, and I'm gonna say, in my professional opinion, I think this whole way that the producers have handled the hidden immunity idol was the intent to create voting blocks.
Oh yeah.
I think the whole thing of needing to have 2 people work on getting the idol was the starter voting block. To have 2 people in order to make a super idol is the guarantee of voting block. So I think that's what they were going for, and I think these producers are such experts that they'll get what they want. I think as we go forward, it's going to be a series of voting blocks, and the producers are going to get what they want, but is that going to guarantee that we're going to see the most exciting finale? I think we're guaranteed to maybe have 1 or 2 good characters, a villain and a hero, in Jason and in Ty that'll be there in the last final 6 or so. But I think there's going to be a lot of boring players around them.
Yeah. Well, those players for the most part we haven't even really touched on them that much, but and there's no judgment against them. I mean, we don't have much to discuss here, but let's quickly go through some of these people that we haven't talked about yet. And it's strange enough, the first person that we really should have brought up, who was the center of the vote, we haven't really talked about at all, in Aubry. So tell us what you're feeling about Aubry this week. This was finally, I guess, the week we started to see some game from her.
Yeah, she's gonna get painted to be a lot like Chaos Cass, who in her first go around. Even though Cass was a much more livelier character, but I think within her tribe, not necessarily within the Survivor community. Joe is definitely going to paint her to be like Cass, and that she's a flipper, and you can't trust a person that flips. So I think that's going to get her. That's going to be like her tag going forward, is that she's gone from being trustworthy to being untrustworthy. I don't see her going too deep into the game. I think post merge, which is right now, I think she's going to be amongst those early ones to go, just because there's going to be so much centered around her, so much controversy around her over this move.
There are so many fans out there who are insisting Aubry was the winner before this episode even aired, and Noah, probably our biggest contributor here on the show, he said on every single episode that Aubry is going to be a merge boot. So you've just made him a very happy man by agreeing with him here.
All right, Noah.
One thing I should bring up with Aubry is, again, just the reaction from the other side. The people she ended up siding with, Scott, Julia, and Ty. This is sort of what I felt this week that maybe is a bad sign for her. That when they did approach her, she was kind of dismissive of it and gave them the impression, yeah, I don't think she's really willing to play the game with anybody. Are her social skills even there? Because she even said, I'd consider it. I just don't think it's the best option. But normally if you're playing Survivor, I would assume, you've been out there. Somebody comes to you with a plan, you entertain it to them. And she didn't even entertain it. And then when she came back later on, it almost just looked too wishy-washy. Does she have the social skills to go forward?
I think she was too honest for her own good. She basically showed him her cards. And you always want to play your cards close to the vest, no matter what game you're playing. So I think the more deprivation she suffers, the less of a filter she has, and the more honest she is about what she's really thinking. But having you just set up the table of what I was getting at a moment ago, in that you have Ty and Scott basically were the ones who was the ones calling the shot for this last tribal council, and so they're saying they're going to merge the beauty with the brawn. Where does that leave Audrey, who just flipped and took and ended her numbers? That's why I think she's going next, or within the next couple, because they used her, now they don't need her.
Yeah.
So she's like the disposable vote. You use her for one vote, and then you get rid of her before she could flip the script on you. So, I think that's pretty much when she did this move. I think she voted herself out.
We can perfectly transition there into the only guy that we knew for sure was really loyal with her before, and not that we saw either of them on screen saying anything, just what other people said, but Neil. Neil, we've really seen nothing other than him finding the idol, and it's interesting, you brought up earlier on about how this super idol is going to be played and who knows about this. Neil's the one guy with an idol on the outside of this. Scott kind of brings the other two together. So do you think that this will hurt Neil, or is it something where the fact that people aren't, like we saw with Scott, he's going to convince Ty not to use his idol. There's nobody to convince Neil not to use his. So how do you think that can help him going forward or hurt him?
With 3 idols in play, the odds increase of somebody going home with an idol in their pocket. And I think Neil is the odds-on favorite for that. With the idol in his pocket, he's going home.
I mean, do we see the idol in the ice cream pants? Pocket?
Yeah, right.
The one memorable thing about him. With him and Aubry, do you think that that's a potential? Because, again, we haven't seen any real interactions with them. We've just heard other players talking about how they're tight. So, I mean, without really even knowing anything on screen, do you think that that's a possibility?
I think he might go back to Aubry and ask, okay, what's going on? Why is Peter not here? We would have had 4, and then he was untrustworthy, blah, 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 and Neil would say, okay, don't worry about it. Joe won't be on board with that. So it kind of kills what they could have had. So with Joe so far on the outside that he's gonna flip and outlast the entire Brains tribe. I see Neil going home with the idol in his pocket, thinking that they're gonna, that they have more power than they do.
At least he'll give us something to remember about the guy, that's for sure.
Probably the money shot, the look on his face when it's him.
Yeah,
that'll probably do us memorable.
We could quickly talk about Sydney here, who's kind of been absent for the last few weeks, but was a major player earlier on. So, what are your feelings on Sydney at this point in the game?
Sydney's in a good position that she's one of the bronze. But as far as storyline, I think we saw her story, and I think that was it for her story.
Yeah.
I think, she. I know because of her muscular build and her race, we all wanted her to be like another Alicia from Australian Outback. But no, she's not that interesting.
Well, with her, like you said, the fact that she's a bodybuilder, and it's funny because only for the first time this week, now I've been watching her on the show thinking, man, this woman is ripped. But only this past week did I actually see some of her bodybuilding shots. And it's like, when you see her, in her element, it's almost scary. Like, I almost feel like maybe she's trying to hold back at this point. You know, you look at what happened with Tasha in her last 2 seasons. She was, very fit, not a bodybuilder, but very fit. You know, she was a cheerleader, physical, and she was probably the first time we've seen a woman in the last few seasons get picked off as a physical threat. And I have to wonder if Sydney's not doing that at this point, it would probably be a good idea going forward to actually hide some of her potential and challenges just so to not paint a target on her back.
Well, with her and Scott being the probably the 2 biggest threats as far as challenges within her alliance, Scott being the NBA player who's already a millionaire, she's not the one in the direct line of fire. Mm-hmm. There's somebody in front of her who will take some shots before she will. So plus I think it's to their benefit to play keep away with the individual immunity necklace. Mm-hmm. So I totally would not downplay it, because she should be in the majority going forward with the beauties and the bronze forming a 6 alliance plus having the super idol. But she doesn't know about the super idol yet. But I think she knows about the Jason's idol. Mm-hmm. So she shouldn't throttle it down just yet or at all, really. She should play keep away with the immunity necklace so that they can pick off the people they want out. But at the same time, I just think her story is so non-existent that at this point that she's reminding me less and less of Alicia and more of I can't believe I'm forgetting her name. She's from Fiji, a finalist. Of Cassandra.
Cassandra, yeah.
Yeah, where her sound bites are starting to dwindle and her confessionals are starting to dwindle. And by the time Cassandra got to the end, like, she was only good for the standard. Today we have an immunity challenge type sound bites. And that's where we're heading with Sydney here. I just sorry.
I don't even know if we're at that point with the next person here, Michelle.
Oh, man.
There's some big fans out there. I believe let me get your opinion on this. You've probably noticed in the Survivor fan community a big shift from people who are really backing the big characters to maybe now as kind of going against the fact that we've had some of these big characters like Russell Hantz just sort of audience feels crammed down your throat. Where they're jumping on the bandwagon, the people who say 2 words on every episode, and Michelle and Julia are 2 of those people. So are you seeing the same thing Michelle and Julia the fans are seeing? Am I missing something here?
I think if they didn't look as good as they did, they wouldn't have the backing they would have that they have. I'll be honest.
If they were on the Brains tribe and,
Yeah. It's kind of funny because more so today than back when I played, fans are more divided in who they like. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, they went along with whomever the edit told them to like. They were like, they were like mindless robots. I like Ozzy.
Yeah. The only reason the guy came back like 2 more times.
yeah, because he's benefited from the propaganda, Survivor's propaganda. But I like today's crowd is better. Because today's crowd will get behind Jatia, and like she was like a comedy error. They're like, yeah, keep her in. No, she wins.
It's so funny. So funny you say that because my wife loves Jatia.
There you go. So do I.
We have like the year-end Oscar voting, and there was like, who's the best player of all time, and she's putting Jatia out there. I'm like, I just know how this vote's gonna go. But yeah, like with
I'm more in tune with those fans. I think it's great that they just don't go with whom the Survivor gods proclaim they should worship. They don't buy into the whole Messiah of the season edit. Mm-hmm. They like who they like, and that's it.
Yeah.
No matter what the edit is, and that's awesome about today's Survivor fans. And if they want to like Michelle for whatever reason, go for it. She's definitely not getting any favors done by the editor in this season so far. Mm-hmm. But we still got more season. Who knows? Maybe she'll have a moment.
Well, a lot of fans were upset with the whole thing with Julia being out, and it didn't really affect her this week. I mean, she found a way to work in with Ty and Scott, and she avoided being voted out, so that's something for her. The one thing that I'm still not really sure about is the whole hiding her age thing. So what do you think her motives are for that? Like, is this something that people would really be targeting her for being young?
It's funny how people perceive this sort of thing. She's not the first survivor that thought like something that was a bigger deal than it was. Like I remember a few seasons ago, like somebody hiding that they were a model.
Jeremiah, yeah.
yeah, I need to hide that because that'll work against. Come on.
Yeah, like you have to wonder, like what are they like? Go back to your season. If somebody is a model, is that going to make you any more likely to target them?
JP was an underwear model. And before I answer that question, let me set this up. Let me set up the thought process here of being an underwear model. Imagine JP at a job fair. Mr. Calderon, can you work a cash register? No. Can you cook food? No. Can you file paperwork? No. But I can walk around in my underwear. Give me that job. So let's set that up. Coming from that point of view, like you look at my tribe, they were all okay with him being an underwear model, and they got rid of the Marine. Go figure.
What about age though? Like, how would you, like, you make it past day 6 on Cook Islands, and you find out that somebody is 18 years old. How do you perceive them going forward? Are they a threat, or are they somebody you want to work with?
The first thing I do is high five them because they beat the system.
Yeah.
Like there are very few people that young that have ever played Survivor. Mm-hmm. They beat the system. So that means they have something, that the Survivor powers that be were like, all right, we're going to bend the rules for you. You are worth it. So that having said that, that's my mindset already approaching that person. That there's something that the powers that be that know more about this person than I do, than I will during the course of this game. They feel that person is worth bending the rules for. So, okay, what is that something? Is it, it's not going to be just looks because they can get anybody of any age and nowadays with plastic surgery that looks
They build good. Entire tribes around looks now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got to be something. So I would try to find out what that something is and then see if that benefits me. If it benefits me, come on, we're doing this together.
Yeah.
If it does the opposite and it's something that's going to take me out at some point, then sorry, kid, but thanks for coming.
See, honestly, this is why we have contestants on the show to do the recaps. Not that there's anything wrong with just me and Noah talking about it for the last week. For the fans out there, the few fans who want to listen to that, but I would never have even thought of what you just said. I would assume, like most fans, okay, you're 18, you're either easy to manipulate, or you want to get rid of you because, you're a threat. Some people may want to, give you money over somebody who's earned their money. But the fact that you just said, well, looking at this from a casting point of view, I mean, you've been through casting. You know that people are there for a reason. On your season, were you looking at other players that way? Or were you looking at, well, this is the type they were cast as, so what am I missing? What are the producers maybe, see in them that I'm not seeing right now?
Yeah, well, Jonathan Penner was the first person that I looked at like, okay, I could see why casting likes this guy. And I can see, this is a guy that's going to be a focal point of the storytelling. I need to find a way to get with this guy so that I can stick around too. Because if he's the focal point and I'm involved with him, then I'm going to be a part of the focal point as well.
Nice.
So that's what I was looking. If we would have merged, if I would have made it to the merge, and Jonathan was on the same tribe, I would have stood next to him a lot. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I would have aligned with him or that he would have aligned with me. Who the hell knows? But I would have stood next to him a lot.
So that when, 10 years down the road, people are recapping seasons, if they don't know your name, they're like, oh, he was the guy who was always standing behind Penner in all the shots.
Well, a lot of things that fans don't grasp is that there's a flow to the game that doesn't, TV doesn't exactly do it justice, but there's a flow to the game where it's a lot like, it's less so much alliances as it is like a school of fish. Like, you get one fish turn left, they all turn left. You get one turn right, they all turn right, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's a flow of that happens in the game. And so if Jonathan Penner is one of those focal points, and you attach yourself to him, then now you're flowing with him through the game. And just even if you're in an opposing alliance, you'll be the last man standing in your alliance just because you were part of his flow. Mm-hmm. So that's game wise, that's would have been what I was thinking, was to just be part of his flow. If I'd have got in his alliance, great. If I wouldn't have got in his alliance, all right, I'll be the last man standing of the losing alliance here. or he would have been the last man. One of us would have been the last man standing of our alliances. And when you're the last man standing of your alliance, it's more than just the accomplishment of, all right, I made it as far as I can go. It's now I'm an option. You guys are going to turn on yourselves. Like there's nobody else you can get rid of once I'm gone. So I'm an option. I could be the tiebreaker. So that gives me more life. So you want to. That's the reason why you want to be part of somebody's flow when they're the focal point.
See, here I am, like, we don't have a Canadian Survivor. Canadians can't play the American one yet. But, of course, I've spent the last 15 years figuring, okay, if I were ever on Survivor, could I do this? And I can get to the point where I can figure the game out entirely in my head, and yet still would have never occurred to me. And who would have thought of all people asking you a question about Julia on this season would open up my mind to a completely new way of playing the game if I ever get on.
yeah. There's many aspects of Survivor that just, you have to be there. The TV just doesn't do justice. TV is two dimensional. Plus, it's only an hour. I feel like an hour and a half is the best way to portray or to relate Survivor to this audience, as far as not being too long but being long enough. But ideally, you want to have as much coverage as like Big Brother with the live feed and the whatever. That would be ideal. But since we're probably never going to get that, then I think Survivor should be like 90 minutes. And then with that 90 minutes, you at least get a feel for the flow just by being able to observe who's standing next to who's sleeping with who. And I say sleeping with who, not in a sexual way.
Yeah. But it's not Caleb and Ty, just snuggling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Only one person left to talk about, and I don't know what we're going to bring up with him, because, all we've seen is this douchey edit, as you say. Nick, is there anything positive that we're seeing from Nick at this point?
I think Nick is going to be part of a douchebag holocaust that's going to happen. where it's literally going to be one douchebag after another bite the dust in a row. And it's going to, that means the boring people are going to win out, unfortunately. But at the same time, that moment or that series of episodes is going to be so awesome to see one guy after another that think that their shit don't stink. If I could say that on your show, I don't even know. But they bleep it out if you have to. But they think they're so special, and they're going to go one after the other after the other. And it's just going to be awesome. That's what I think is going to happen, because it has to. There's basically two sides of this. There's a group of douchebags. There's a group of boring players, and like one character that's not a douchebag and Ty. That's he's kind of cool, but he's gonna side with the boring players because that's where his beauties are. His two beauties are boring. So
it's great. Every time you come on this show, you always give us a phrase, something like that we could go forward with. And one day people are going to be looking back and talking about the douchebag holocaust of Kaoh Rong 2016. You coined it right here.
Right here. There you go. You guys are going to have to hashtag it as you live tweet now.
Yeah, for sure. Credit to Billy Garcia. We'll wrap this up here with our final 5 questions. And
all right.
Just to remind you of your episode 2 predictions here. I'll kind of give you one at a time here as we go through the questions, but I'll give them after the fact, just so we can see, whether you're credible or not in the new answers. So, first, let's go with your tip to win now that we're entering the merge of Survivor Kaoh Rong.
My tip to win, I'm gonna shock a lot of people. I think he's gonna be Ty. I think he's too lovable. I think he can do no wrong to that jury. That jury is gonna JT him. Their questions to the people he's sitting with are gonna be, how wonderful is Ty? Isn't he awesome?
He would. You mentioned how unlikable some of these people are. Ty, he's pretty much untouched at this point. Like, who has Ty even had a negative moment on this show?
No, he's been the golden boy. I don't know what really happens with Ty because I wasn't there. But if somebody would tell me like Ty got the greatest edit of all time and he was actually one of the douchebags too, like I'd have been like, okay, well, damn, yeah. They got me.
Well, I actually really like your reasoning behind Ty, but On the flip side, episode 2, your tip to win was Liz, who went in episode 3, and your backup was Peter. So take it for what it's worth. But maybe you're like we saw in your season. Had you been around for another week, you would have learned from it. I think you're learning at this point, and Ty's gonna be a lot closer than your last pick.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Liz was just New York bias.
Yeah. I mean, plus, like, look at this season. I think all of us were surprised when Liz went, just as much as we were surprised when Anna went. It wasn't one of those things you could see coming a week earlier.
For sure. And if Liz and Peter would not have been arrogant in that moment, and Joe would have went out, or whomever, it'd have been a totally different story. They would have went much, much further. They definitely would have been on the jury. But, all it takes is one mistake, and you're out. And in the case of Liz, it was the attitude.
What about your dark horse? We'll see if it lines up, if you can remember your prediction. I don't know, but we'll see if it lines up with your episode 2 prediction. Who's the dark horse at this point?
The dark horse. Yeah, there's a lot that's changed since episode 2. Quite a bit that's changed. This is a tougher pick now because I really do believe that douchebag Holocaust is going to happen. So, you know what? I'm gonna surprise you. I'm gonna go with Joe, and that the reason why I'm picking Joe is because he's an outsider that's a free agent right now. At least it looks that way, and so maybe his story is how he he sort of bobbed and weaved and he really did play out like a Rudy, where he found his way towards the end. And unlike Rudy, he didn't blow it at the end. He made it to the finals. And an old man like that who's just tough as nails, it's kind of hard not to say, yeah, he out-toughed people for this title.
Now, how great would it be for the show for a person like Joe to win or even make the finals and make a positive impression? How many more 70-year-olds are we going to get on there? Like, that would be fantastic for the show, I think, to get a lot more of these older characters we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, you know what? Would be awesome for the show? If Joe sat next to Julia. Because then you got the oldest guy with the youngest girl sitting at the end, and that would be like ratings bonanza, and they would be flooded with people filling out applications to go on Survivor. Because now there is no excuse. People will be like, hey, they did it, I can do it. And everybody can relate.
It wasn't even like 1 or 2 seasons ago where I think somebody was like 52 years old and they were the oldest on the season. Who was the oldest on Cook Islands?
The oldest on Cook Islands was Sekou Bunch. He was just shy. He was around 50 or just shy of 50.
Man, I don't think anybody would have pegged him even as being an old guy on a season.
Yeah. He technically, by Survivor standards, he's not old at all. But before our season, he was the oldest guy, and of course, he was the first one to go. And I think that was the reason why. I think that plus he had, the way our tribes were was 5, so it was an uneven number. So he had 3 women and 2 guys on his tribe. The 3 women teamed up against the oldest guy. So that to me was something that even to this day doesn't sit well with me. In that it kind of slanted or stacked the deck a little too much for Sekou to overcome.
Yeah. Just as a reminder, your episode 2 dark horse was Sydney. Do you still feel there's some hope for her?
I think she's if she makes it to the end, she's Cassandra part Duke.
Yeah. So maybe Joe's a more realistic pick here. Let's see about this one. Who do you think is going to be the next to go? We're entering the merge, so it's really tough to predict. So we'll forgive you if next time you're on, we're laughing at you for this pick.
I'm going to stick with what I was saying earlier. I think it's Aubry.
Yeah? On episode 2, you predicted Joe was going to be the next one to go. So, I mean, he's still sticking around.
He's sticking. He should have been. See, that's the whole thing. That whole moment of Joe not going is what killed Liz and eventually killed Peter. If he would have been the one to go, I would have been looking pretty. But since he wasn't the one to go, my picks to go far, they got eaten up because of that one mistake.
You answer this next question, and I don't think it's changed since episode 2. Of the brains, brawn, or beauty, which tribe would you be on? You said brawn last time. I'm assuming still the same thing?
Yeah, I think because of my pro wrestling background and my Marine Corps background, that kind of overrides my heavy metal background, which probably wouldn't fit into any of the tribes anyway. Unless I could say I make beautiful music, you know.
Yeah. Well, come on. They found a way to work Ty into the beauty tribe. Why not?
Exactly, because Ty is a landscaper. He makes the land beautiful. So maybe, you know, maybe that's how I get on the beauty tribe is making beautiful music.
Just for the fun of it, let's play a bit of a game here.
Okay.
Other than yourself, pick one person from your season to be on each Brains, Brawn, and Beauty. Who would you cast if you're casting Cook Islands as a Brains, Brawn, and Beauty?
Okay. Bronze, you know, there's a lot of people that fit that description because Nate right now competes in the strongest man in the world competition.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with Nate for bronze.
Of course.
Yeah, because Dr. Candace Cody is now a doctor. I go with her for brains.
Yeah.
And beauty, Poverty got voted like the #1 most beautiful person in Survivor history. So I think my season's kind of easy to pick when it comes to these tribes.
Which tribe does Penner land on? That's the real important question.
Ooh, Penner. There isn't a smartass tribe. So, you know what? Because Penner is an artist, I'm gonna put him on the beauty tribe.
Yeah. I think
he makes beautiful short movies that win Oscars.
I did the recap with Penner last season. I think it's safe to say Penner would cast himself on all 3 tribes. That would be his choice.
Yeah. I'll believe that.
Final question here. Which player are you most like at this point in Kaoh?
Oh, good Lord, man. Is there somebody that I'm most like on this Kaoh?
Be kind to yourself here.
Jeez. Let's see. There's so many people that are just so bland. It's hard to pick one. You know what? I'm gonna say Ty just because only for the reason that he's the biggest character in the game right now.
Yeah.
And I was the biggest character in the game when I was in there.
Your answer in episode 2 was Jenny, which is so strange. Like, I don't think it was just, I don't know if you gave the answer as because she was an early boot, because she drew too much attention to herself, but the way that she stood up in that tribal council, I kind of look at that and I'm like, that's a Billy Garcia thing. He'd be standing his ground there, standing up on the platform, talking to everybody.
Yeah. You know, I think with Jenny, I kind of felt that tribal council moment. She had one, I had one. So, yeah. Yeah, but hers isn't echoing like mine's did. Mine's echoed throughout the Cook Island season. Yeah. Where the very next episode they were still on screen talking about me. And yeah. So I don't know. But then again, it was a different era. Back when I played, man, coming off like I think I might have mentioned, coming off of your boot, like everybody was a rock star back then, no matter where you were booted.
Yeah. For sure.
So yeah, you know, it's very different nowadays where nowadays your shelf life is like milk. You know, there's an expiration date before they've even picked it up, you know, and paid for it on the in the cash register.
It's probably the social media thing because there's so much criticism that gets thrown at you from fans now that if it's your day after you're booted, you're probably just, you know, dodging death threats and everything. Like, you didn't have to deal with that back in your day.
Well, the death threats I did have to deal with. Remember, my season, they divided us by race.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of controversy. And then the geniuses at CBS decided that they wanted to hold my boot interview on the CBS early show outdoors. So, yeah, thank you, CBS. So there was protesters around us.
Oh.
They were, oh, man, it was bad. They wanted Survivor pulled off the air because of the whole race thing, and it was pretty bad. That's why it's still online. If you go to that interview of the CBS early show, we're like moving at light speed. Like we're trying to get that thing over with.
I need to go back and watch that now. Just as soon as this is over, that's the first thing I'm going to do. All the fans have to watch that too. What would it have been like if you had social media back then? Like, would you have deactivated your accounts just leading into it?
No, I would have had like 3 million followers on Twitter.
Just milk it for all it's worth, right?
Yeah, me and Lex both talked about this way back when we first joined Twitter. We joined Twitter around the same time together. We were like, man, like if we had MySpace, man, that's like the Betamax of social media. We had Twitter back when we were on. Good Lord, like we would be like at the bank right now, just 25,423, 25,424. Like, we would just be milking it every day. Like, today, like, all right, the social media is still big and all, but it's definitely not the big business. The Survivor's not the big business that it was back then. So the social media doesn't equate to dollars like it did back then.
Yeah, maybe if you can get on like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette or something like that, it would be a little bit better. There's got to be some reality show out there that draws bigger numbers. The Voice, hey, you're a musician. Go on The Voice one day.
You know what? You were mentioning The Bachelorette, and I have been approached by many reality shows in recent times. And not even recent time, just overall during my time since Survivor. And I've done a few of them, mostly of Canadians. Like I did Reality Obsessed and TV Made Me Do It. I've been on a few Canadian shows. But there was this one show in particular, now you mentioned that, where it was supposed to be like a comedy reality show where they wanted me to like be like Jack Black in School of Rock. Like that kind of guy. Like he basically lives in sleeps on a mattress on the floor and that sort of thing. But it was going to be like a Bachelorette or a Bachelor where I'm the Bachelor and a bunch of women will be, trying to figure out why the hell they're competing for my love.
I want to see that show.
Yeah, the show fell through, unfortunately. The money wasn't there. The sponsorship wasn't there. But, man, that would have been like a great comedy reality show.
Hey, you know what? There's some Canadian reality TV is finally starting to take off. They have not jumped on the bandwagon of Survivor. We need, like, Ladies Love Billy Garcia on Canadian TV right now. There's a producer out there who's listening who has to make that show happen.
Yeah, you know what? I would say it would definitely work in Canada because Canadians have a good sense of humor towards Americans. So, us Americans sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously, but Canadians have a good sense of humor towards us. So it would definitely work in Canada.
Yeah. Let's look forward to it. It's always good to have you on, Billy. You're by far you're the guy we go to because you always provide an entertaining recap. So thanks for doing this for a second time this season. And, we've gotten your Survivor opinions. I see in the background we've transitioned from baseball into other TV. Who are you following in baseball this year? Who's your team?
Always the New York Yankees.
Yeah? Oh, New York guy, of course. I don't think it wouldn't be legal for you to go for anybody else.
I would probably get lynched if I wore a hat from another team in my neighborhood. But, New York Yankees has always been my team, even when I was living in Miami, Florida. Yeah, they're like the Empire in the Star Wars movies.
Oh, yeah. And you mentioned pro wrestling background, too. We got WrestleMania coming up this weekend. Not just Survivor, exciting stuff. What's your prediction for WrestleMania? Let's get that while you're on the line. Let's just cover all bases.
Okay, yeah, I think Roman Reigns is going to win the title against Triple H, and then he's going to turn heel.
Yeah, there won't be any other option if anybody watches it.
So I think they're going to feud him with Dean Ambrose, who I think is going to get a lucky win against Brock Lesnar. And I think in the Undertaker match, I think Sting is going to show up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which will be great, because everybody wants to see Sting versus the Undertaker.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be great. I think they're going to pull like they did with Kane when Kane first was introduced. And he showed up at a Hell in a Cell.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be the same thing with Sting to kick off that feud.
So now we have something else that we can call back to the next time you're on for a recap. Let's see how your predictions ended up. While you're on the line, I'm Canadian, so I have to get this. Whether you follow hockey or not, give me a Stanley Cup prediction here.
A Stanley Cup prediction. I would be lynched as well if I did not predict the New York Rangers.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, are you going to lynch me for the fact that I'm pulling for the Islanders? That's my other team, my non-Canadian team.
I'm not going to lynch you, but the Islanders, they are so overdue. Like, It's been a really long time since they won one. So if they won one, I'd be okay with it. They have like a curse that they need to get over first.
Yeah.
Not as bad as the Chicago Cubs curse, but it's still a big curse.
Well, my other team, my main team, is the Maple Leafs, so we're even worse. So I'm kind of pulling for the underdogs, I guess. I promise if the Rangers play the Islanders, we'll get you on here for a live recap of Game 1.
Nice. You can count me in.
Again, thanks so much for doing this, Billy, and we hope to hear from you at some point again, whether it be this season or another season.
Oh, thank you so much. And all of you in the New York area, my band is playing April 2nd at Blackthorn 51s in Queens, New York. What did I say? April 52nd? April 2nd. I'm just creating months somehow. Helluary, it's 100 days. On April 2nd at Blackthorn 51 in Queens. And we go on at 10:30.
Yeah, and we should say, we would have had this recap sooner, but you were rehearsing hard with your band, so it's going to be a good show, because you're putting lots of time into the rehearsal for it, so people need to check it out.
Yeah, we got new songs that we're going to introduce that are going to be on the second album, so you're going to get to hear some new songs for the first time if you show up.
All right, and hopefully we can play out one of those songs next time you're on the show. Give us a sample of it. We'll play out the end music to you.
All right, sounds good.
And no joke, seriously, huge thanks to Billy Garcia for being able to fill in this week, as we're still trying to iron things out in Ben's absence here. We obviously had a few weeks off from recaps. It wasn't from lack of trying, it's hard to schedule these things, and all the more credit to Ben, who's able to pull this off every single week, because obviously from what I've discovered, it's not that easy to always have a Survivor contestant in there. But we will have somebody next week, and I can say that almost certainly, not that it's worked out the last couple weeks, but almost certainly Diane Ogden from my all-time favorite season, Survivor Africa, will be here to recap the Merge episode 7 with us. So you can start getting your questions in now, send them to us on the page. While you're there, give us a like, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, give us a comment, read all of our articles, read the recaps that Clifton works really hard on, listen to the Oztopsy, the Ozlit show. A lot of people are stepping up right now and helping out on the show, and there's a lot of good material getting out. So we do hope to have Ben back soon, but in the meantime, we'll just provide you the best content possible. And until next time, we will speak to you on the train.